Steve Harvey read the wrong name and crowned the wrong Miss Universe in front of 1 billion viewers. What happened next became the most watched TV mistake in history and proved that sometimes our biggest failures can become our greatest lessons in grace under pressure. It was December 2014, and the Miss Universe pageant was being held at the Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Steve Harvey, the veteran comedian and talk show host, had been chosen to host the prestigious international competition for the first time. For Steve, this was a huge career milestone. Miss Universe is one of the most watched events in the world, broadcast to over 190 countries, with an audience exceeding 1 billion people. It was a chance to showcase his hosting abilities on a truly global stage. The pageant had gone smoothly all evening. Steve had delivered his trademark humor, kept the energy high, and connected well with the international audience. The contestants were stunning, the performances were spectacular, and the production was flawless. As the evening progressed toward the final moments, 3 women remained: Miss Colombia, Ariadna Gutierrez, Miss Philippines, Pia Wurtzbach, and Miss Australia, Monica Radlovich. Steve had hosted enough live television to know that the final moments of any competition are crucial. This was when millions of people around the world would be paying the closest attention, when social media would explode with reactions, when careers and dreams would be made or broken with a single announcement. The production team had given Steve the results card just before the final segment. On the card, the winners were clearly listed: 3rd runner-up, 2nd runner-up, 1st runner-up, and Miss Universe 2015. It seemed straightforward enough. But there was a formatting issue with the card that Steve didn't notice in the excitement of the moment. The way the information was laid out was confusing, with Miss Universe listed at the bottom rather than the top, and the runners-up listed in reverse order above it. Steve looked at the card quickly, saw Miss Colombia near Miss Universe, and assumed she had won. He didn't take the extra moment to read the card carefully or double-check the format with the production team. "The first runner-up is Miss Philippines," Steve announced confidently. Pia Wurtzbach, Miss Philippines, smiled graciously and stepped forward to accept her first runner-up position. In her mind, she was disappointed but proud to have made it so far in the competition. And the new Miss Universe is Miss Colombia. The arena erupted in celebration. Ariadna Gutierrez, Miss Colombia, was overcome with emotion as the crown was placed on her head and the Miss Universe sash was draped across her shoulder. She waved to the crowd, tears of joy streaming down her face. For 4 minutes, Ariadna Gutierrez was Miss Universe. She walked the runway, posed for photos, and basked in what she believed was the greatest moment of her life. Her family in Colombia was celebrating. Her country was erupting in joy, and social media was flooded with congratulations. Meanwhile, backstage, the production team was in chaos. They had immediately realized Steve's mistake, but they faced an impossible situation. How do you correct an error of this magnitude on live television in front of 1 billion viewers? The producers were frantically discussing their options. They could wait until after the broadcast and issue a correction later, but that would mean letting Ariadna believe she had won for potentially hours. They could cut to commercial and handle it off-air, but the show was already running long and they were live in multiple time zones. Finally, they made the decision that would create one of the most difficult moments in television history. They told Steve he had to correct his mistake immediately, on live television, in front of the world. Steve was handed a note from the production team while Ariadna was still taking her victory walk. When he read it, his heart sank. He had just made the biggest mistake of his professional career, and he had to fix it in front of 1 billion people. For a few moments, Steve stood frozen on the stage, trying to process what he had to do. He could see Ariadna celebrating, could see the joy on her face, could imagine how devastating this correction was going to be for her. He also knew that his own career might be over after this moment. But Steve Harvey had built his career on authenticity and taking responsibility for his actions. He knew he had to do the right thing, no matter how painful it would be. Steve walked back to the microphone, his face serious and visibly distressed. "Folks," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I have to apologize." The audience, which had been celebrating, began to quiet down. Something in Steve's tone indicated this wasn't part of the show. "The first runner-up is Miss Colombia," Steve said, his voice breaking slightly. The arena fell completely silent. Ariadna, still wearing her crown and sash, looked confused. The other contestants looked shocked. The audience didn't understand what was happening. "And the new Miss Universe 2015 is Miss Philippines." The silence was deafening. Then slowly, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Ariadna's face transformed from confusion to shock to devastation. Pia Wurtzbach looked equally stunned, unsure whether to be happy or horrified. "Listen, folks, let me just take control of this," Steve said, trying to manage the chaos. "This is exactly what's on the card. I will take responsibility for this. It was my mistake. It was on the card." Steve held up the results card to the camera, showing the confusing layout that had led to his error. "Horrible mistake, but the right thing. I can show it to you right here," Steve said, pointing to the card. "The first runner-up is Colombia. It is my mistake." What followed was one of the most awkward and heartbreaking moments in television history. Ariadna had to remove her crown and sash and hand them to Pia, all while cameras captured every emotion on her face. The joy, confusion, devastation, and dignity she showed in that moment would be watched by millions of people around the world. Pia Wurtzbach was crowned Miss Universe 2015, but her moment of triumph was overshadowed by the chaos and the obvious pain of the woman who had briefly held the title before her. Steve left the stage immediately after the correction, but the damage was done. Within minutes, Steve Harvey was trending worldwide on social media. Memes were created, jokes were shared, and calls for his firing began almost immediately. The backlash was swift and brutal. Social media was flooded with criticism, jokes, and outright attacks on Steve's competence and character. Colombian fans were particularly upset, feeling that their representative had been humiliated on the world stage. "Steve Harvey is trending worldwide and not in a good way," one tweet read. "How do you mess up reading a card? Poor Miss Colombia. That had to be the most embarrassing moment in pageant history," another user posted. "Steve Harvey just proved that even the simplest jobs can be messed up spectacularly," wrote another critic. But in the hours and days that followed, something unexpected began to happen. Steve's response to his mistake started to change the narrative. First, Steve immediately took full responsibility. He didn't blame the card format, the production team, or anyone else. He owned his error completely. "I want to apologize emphatically to Miss Colombia and Miss Philippines for my huge mistake," Steve posted on social media that night. "I feel terrible." Second, Steve personally apologized to both women. He sought out Ariadna and Pia after the show to speak with them directly, expressing his sincere regret for the situation he had created. Third, Steve didn't hide from the criticism. He appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and addressed the mistake head-on rather than trying to minimize it or deflect blame. "I made a mistake," Steve said on his radio show the next morning. "I read the card wrong. I take full responsibility for that, but I want people to know that I didn't do it on purpose, and I feel terrible about the pain I caused both of those young women." Perhaps most importantly, Steve showed genuine concern for how his mistake had affected Ariadna and Pia rather than focusing on how it had affected him. "My heart goes out to Miss Colombia," Steve said. "She handled that situation with such grace and dignity, and Miss Philippines deserved to have her moment be about her achievement, not about my mistake." As the days passed, public opinion began to shift. People started to recognize that Steve had handled the aftermath of his mistake with integrity and genuine remorse. The initial anger began to give way to understanding that everyone makes mistakes, and what matters is how we respond to them. Ariadna Gutierrez, Miss Colombia, showed remarkable grace throughout the ordeal. In interviews after the pageant, she was dignified and forgiving. "These things happen," she said. "It was a great experience to be Miss Universe for 4 minutes, and I'm proud of how I represented my country." Pia Wurtzbach, the rightful Miss Universe, also handled the situation with class, expressing empathy for Ariadna while graciously accepting her title. "I felt bad for Miss Colombia," Pia said. "She didn't deserve to go through that, and I wished my moment could have been less complicated." 6 months later, something remarkable happened. Steve Harvey was invited back to host Miss Universe 2016. The organization had been impressed not with his mistake, but with how he had handled the aftermath. "Everyone makes mistakes," said Paula Shugart, president of the Miss Universe organization. "But not everyone takes responsibility the way Steve did. His integrity in handling this situation actually made us more confident in him as a host." At Miss Universe 2016, Steve addressed his previous year's mistake with humor and humility. "Let me just say this," Steve said at the top of the show. "I have the right card this time." The audience laughed, and Steve successfully hosted a mistake-free pageant. But the real redemption came in the relationship Steve built with both Ariadna and Pia. He maintained contact with both women, supporting their careers and causes in the years that followed. "Steve became like a father figure to me," Pia said in a later interview. "His mistake actually brought us together, and I'm grateful for the friendship we developed." Ariadna, meanwhile, used her experience to become an advocate for grace under pressure and handling disappointment with dignity. "What happened to me was difficult," she said, "but it taught me that how we handle our worst moments defines who we really are." Steve's Miss Universe mistake became a case study in crisis management and personal accountability. Business schools began using it as an example of how to handle professional failures with integrity. Steve Harvey showed the world that when you make a mistake, you own it, you apologize sincerely, and you work to make it right, said Dr. Michael Foster, a crisis management expert. His response actually enhanced his reputation more than if he had never made the mistake at all. The incident also led to changes in how major live events handle result announcements. Cards are now formatted more clearly. Hosts are given more time to review results, and backup systems are in place to prevent similar mistakes. Steve continued to host Miss Universe for several more years, and his mistake became a defining moment, not for its error, but for the grace and accountability he showed in its aftermath. "That mistake taught me more about myself than any success I've ever had," Steve reflected years later. "It taught me that your character isn't defined by your mistakes. It's defined by how you respond to them." Today, the Miss Universe mistake is remembered not as a career-ending blunder, but as a masterclass in taking responsibility and handling failure with dignity. It reminded the world that everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone has the character to own them completely and work to make them right. The billion people who watched Steve Harvey make that mistake also got to watch him show what real accountability looks like. In an age where public figures often deflect blame and make excuses, Steve's response was a reminder of what integrity in action actually looks like. Miss Colombia got 4 minutes as Miss Universe. Miss Philippines got the crown she deserved, and the world got a lesson in grace under pressure that was more valuable than any pageant could have planned. If this incredible story of turning a massive mistake into a lesson in accountability and grace moved you, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that our mistakes don't define us, our responses to them do. Have you ever had to own up to a major mistake in front of others? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about finding strength in our most difficult moments.